All right, and let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that I'm sure a lot of you are thinking here is, what is full site editing? And basically, if you're familiar with the WordPress block editor, or the Gutenberg editor as it's sometimes called, you already know a lot about the fact that it offers a lot of flexibility and customization options. Basically, if there's a page layout that you want to create, there's a block for that would be able to help you with that layout. In full site editing, it expands on those concepts so that blocks are something you can customize throughout the site, including your headers, your footers, your sidebars, etc. So you're no longer contained to just the middle part of the page, but you actually get to customize the entire site using the same block tools you're familiar with. And another thing I want to mention here is that full site editing is tied to the type of theme that you're using. So to turn on full site editing, you need to activate a block theme on your site. So that leads to our next question, of course, which is, what are block themes? And I know this is going to sound really obvious, but they're themes that are constructed entirely from blocks. And if you stop and think about that for a second, it's actually pretty revolutionary, because it means that you're no longer limited to just a handful of theme settings, because individual blocks by themselves have a tremendous range of options. And collectively, an entire site built out of blocks has almost limitless possibilities. Because everything is a block, with full site editing, the design of your theme is no longer set in stone, but is now something you can think of as a starting point for creating any look that you want. And this also means that with full site editing, you can create custom designs for your site without a single line of code, and you don't even need a web developer. The only thing that I need to point out here is that full site editing can't be used with classic themes. It doesn't interchange. The coding that under the surface is really quite different. And so to enable full site editing on your site, you'd have to use a block theme. There's no way to retrofit that onto classic themes. And as I mentioned at the start of our webinar, full site editing has been in beta for some time, but with the recent launch of WordPress 5.9, it's now officially version 1, and it's something that you can start using today. So if you're on WordPress.com, to use full site editing, all you need to do is create a new site. Our site setup flow walks you through the process. It allows you to pick a block theme, and the site that you get on the other end is a full site editing enabled site. It's not possible on WordPress.com to switch your existing site to a block theme yet, however, but there is a few exceptions. So if you happen to have our business or e-commerce upgrade on your site, your site is on our managed business hosting platform that allows you to upload any theme or plugin that you wish, and that would include block themes. And if you're self-hosted and you're using WordPress on another provider like GoDaddy or Bluehost, you want to make sure, like I said, that your site is updated to WordPress 5.9, and then all you need to do is activate the block theme to enable full site editing. Or you can do what is my favorite approach, and that is to export the contents of your existing site and import them into a new site that has full site editing enabled. I think this is the best of both worlds, because it allows you to keep your existing site online so people can visit it like nothing's changed. And then in the background, it gives you an opportunity to safely experiment and play with full site editing on a secondary site. And so that's the method I'd like to show you today. This is Have Camera Will Travel, my long-running photo blog, which I set up some time ago with a classic theme. And it was a great look at the time, but I'd like to update it and customize it, which is just not really possible with this theme. For example, I'd like to be able to resize the logo and maybe tweak the title font. I'd also just like a wider homepage overall, maybe not even have this sidebar here anymore. And that would allow me to show the featured images for my blog posts a little bit larger and really show off the photography better. I'd also like to have a section up here at the top which would allow me to feature a blog post, maybe my most recent blog post, just so visitors to my site can see my first blog post really large and really catch their eye. So to do that, first what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the My Sites tab at the upper left. And here under Tools in my sidebar, I'm going to go to Export. And I'm just going to choose the Export All option. I'm going to give this a few minutes to run. And then when the export is successful, you can see we get this message here at the top. I'm going to go ahead and download this to my computer right now. Once we have that downloaded, I'm going to go up here to the left and I'm going to switch to my All Sites view. And I'm going to click on the link to add a new site. From here, I'm going to give my site a title, and I'm going to go ahead and click continue. And for what we're doing here, I'm just going to go ahead and choose a free domain name for now. I do have the option down the road to get a custom domain, so for now this is good just so we can experiment. And then now it's also time to choose a design, and we have quite a few themes here, and they're all for full site editing. So any one of these you pick will load the full site editor by default. So I'm going to choose this one, which I like sort of the open feel of it, and it already displays the images really well. It's a little bit more minimal than I'm looking for, but I think it's going to be a good starting point. So let's choose that, and I do have the option to add a custom domain or e-commerce or a few other options now. But I'm just going to go ahead and skip and just start with a really simple site, and I can add those later. So free site for now, and I'm going to click select to build the site. Once the site is ready, we're dropped into the site editor for our site, where if we wish, we can actually begin customizing things. And you can see that it looks an awful lot like the demo for the theme that we were looking at. And it actually looks like we're on the live site, but as I move around and sort of hover my cursor over things, you can see that everything here I can interact with, including in the header. I have the option to interact with this area here where we might add a logo, or this area over here where we can add a navigation menu, for example. And that's when you can see that everything here in the site editor view is actually made from blocks. Let's take a little bit of a break here. We've just started loading up the interface, and we're starting to take a look at it, but it's probably a good idea for us to cover a couple of basic concepts before we dive into the full site editor completely. And I think these concepts will really help you as you navigate your way around these new tools. So first, let's start with a blank template. This is a page from our website, but as you can see, it has no structure right now. So to start things off, let's add a block to the top of our page. And inside that block, let's add some more blocks for your logo, your page title, and your site navigation. On a block theme, these group of blocks within blocks are called a template part. In this case, this is called the header template part. Keeping it bundled together like this saves us the trouble of having to build the header from scratch on every template. Instead, it's just a collection of blocks that we can use over and over again when we're building out our site. Let's add another set of blocks to our template. On the block theme, this is called the footer template part. And you can see that even though I haven't added anything into the middle yet, we already have the makings of a good website template. And that's just with two template parts, the header and the footer. And we can use these template parts as a starting point for many of the templates that we'll need on our site. For example, we could add a query loop here into the middle of the template. And this query loop is a block that allows you to display a feed of blog posts. And on block themes, this is called the index template because it displays a feed or an index of blog posts. We could also use this same starter template as a starting point for creating new pages on our site. On the block theme, this is called the page template. And typically, when you create a new page on your WordPress site, this is the template that's used. So it starts out as a blank page. And when you add a new page on your site, you see that blank page. And when you start typing and adding your text and images, it's added into the center of this page template, and it becomes the basis for many pages on your site. If we were to delete this text and images and add a contact form, for example, this could easily be your contact page. Some themes might even include a special template like this one here that we can use for our homepage. This template has a call to action section at the top, and below that, a modified query loop that presents a small feed of blog posts. In each of these examples, we don't have to create the template from scratch every time. We can just plug in our header and footer template parts and save time by using those as our starting point. And this is how template parts, these little blocks within blocks, form the foundation for all the templates that are included in block themes. We've presented just a few templates in our example, but you could easily use these same building blocks to create a custom 404 page or a template to display search results on your site or more. So let's recap. Template parts are a group of blocks that are bundled together and that you can use over and over again. Some template parts, like the header and the footer, they get used over and over on all the pages of the site. For most themes, you'll see a header and a footer on the pages. And unless it's a special theme, it generally has the same header and footer on all the pages. On the other hand, some template parts might only get used once or twice in specific places. You can make a sidebar template part, for example. You might use it on some of your templates, but you might not have a sidebar on all of your templates. And although you might not have thought of it before, you can now see that page templates on your theme, they really start out as just a collection of template parts. So let's do a little pop quiz. When do you think you'd want to edit a template part? You would want to do that when you want to make a change that appears site-wide. And when I say site-wide, what I mean to say is that it doesn't necessarily mean that the template part that you're modifying appears on every template, but it does mean that when you edit that template part, you're going to edit it for all of the other templates that template part happens to appear on. So let's use an example. Let's say I want to change the logo and the site title in my header, and I really only want to edit that in one place and then just have the change picked up everywhere. So to do that, I would just edit the template part directly. And then when I save my change, you can see that this update is reflected across all of the templates that happen to use the header template part. So the other question is, when would you actually want to edit the template itself? Not the template part, but the template that has all the parts in it. And you'd want to do that when you only want to see a change that happens on that template only and doesn't spread to other templates. So for example, let's say that I want to update my index template so that my blog feed here has the text on the left and has the images on the right. And I want to change this query loop block here on this index page, or this index template, excuse me, but I want to make sure that I don't make any changes to any other blog feeds that I have on my site. So to do that, I would load the index template in the site editor. And then when you save your changes, you'll see that that change is only reflected on the index template. If I switch back and forth, you can see that's the one that changes, but none of the other templates are affected. So when you edit a template in full, you're only editing the things that are on that template. It doesn't spread to the other templates on your site. Okay, so now that we've got those terms out of the way and we've discussed a few concepts, let's go ahead and get back to editing our site. Back here on our new site, you can see we are in the site editor where we can work with blocks directly. Since I'm already considering updating an existing site, instead of working with the demo content pre-installed here, I'm going to go ahead and import the contents from my other site. So to do that, I'm going to leave the site customizer and go back to my dashboard. And then similar to what I did in the other site, I'm going to go back to Tools in my sidebar, and this time I'm going to click on the Import option. I'm going to choose WordPress to import from. And you could enter the URL of your site, but since I've already downloaded my export file, I can just go ahead and upload it to import. So let's go ahead and do that. Here's my file on my computer, and since I have both windows open, I can just drag and drop, and that starts the upload process for my import. I just need to resolve a few permissions issues, and then I can go ahead and start my import. And after you give this a little bit of time to run, it depends on the size of the export file you created on your other site. But once we're finished here, we'll have all of our contents loaded on our site. Okay, and now our import is complete. From here, I'm going to go into my post section of my dashboard. And you can see I've got a couple sample posts here from the theme when we started. So I'm just going to go ahead and move those to the trash quickly, just so we're working with the blog posts from the other site. And now that we're done, let's go back to the site editor, which is here under the Appearance tab in the sidebar. And once the site editor loads, you can see that we're back on our site again with our new theme, only this time you can see that it is now with our content in place. And this is the nice thing about moving content between sites. We have all of our same content here, nothing about that has changed, but we now have it on a new theme, and we now have a starting point we can customize from. Before we get started, I want to show you a few more things about the full site editing interface. First, here in the upper left is the list view. This opens a sidebar that shows you all the blocks that are in use in this template. List view is really helpful for navigating and understanding the block structure of the template. And from here, you can also easily click on blocks to select them, as well as clicking on them within the site editor directly. It can also help to collapse these sections down so your view is a little less cluttered. Here you can see that our template uses a familiar structure. It has a header template part at the top, a query loop block that is creating the blog feed for this page, and a footer template part at the bottom of the page with our website credit. Another thing I want to point out on the right is this button that reveals the settings sidebar. If you click on blocks in the editor view, you can see that each block has a floating toolbar with block settings. In addition to that, most blocks also have settings here in the sidebar as well. And you can see as I click on each block to the right, we have even more settings to control. Also here on the right is the Styles button, which reveals a sidebar that has some site-wide design settings. It allows us to control things like the typography on our site. I actually really like the typography for this theme by default, so I'm going to leave these alone. But it also lets you do things like change the color settings, and I would like to change that. I would actually like to set a gray background instead of the cream color this theme comes with. This looks a little dark, so I think what I'm going to do is click on the swatch here and then lighten it up just a little bit. I think that's perfect. I also want to point out here at the top that you can see the name of the template we're working on. This is the index template, which displays an index or feed of blog posts from our site. Because our site is a photography blog, the index template is the default template for our homepage. Okay, now that we've covered more about the interface, let's get to work modifying our site. The first thing I wanted to do was make some changes to the header, and it would be really tempting to make the changes here in the index template. But if we do that, it'll only make the changes here, which would show on our homepage, but the other headers on the site wouldn't be changed. So first let's save our changes so far. When you save, you can see a checklist of all the changes you've made here to this template. In this case, we've just made one change, so we'll go ahead and confirm that. Now that the changes are saved, let's click on the site icon in the upper left, which shows the other sections of the editor. In this case, we want to go to Template Parts, and then locate the header template part for this theme. You can see as well this theme comes with several other template parts, such as the footer, and even a few alternate headers that we could use if we wanted to. In this case, we'll just stick with editing the header template part itself. And now that it's loaded, let's upload a logo to the header. I have one here that I've added to my media library, so I'll just click to insert it into the header. This is a little small, so I'm going to drag the size to make it a bit bigger. And also I know this block has a few extra settings, so I'm going to reveal those in the sidebar, and I'm going to choose the rounded option. I think that looks pretty good. Also, I want to make sure that we add our site tagline because it wasn't captured during the site setup process. And then the last change we want to make here is we want to make sure to set up the navigation menu. Because I imported content from another site, I can click to select a menu, and under classic menus I can see the one that I set up before when my site was using a classic theme. And now our header looks complete. I'm going to go ahead and save this template part. You can see a list of the changes that we made. We could deselect a few of these if we wanted to. For example, we could just save the change to the tagline but uncheck the change to the logo. But we're going to save it as is. And once the save is confirmed, let's go back again to our site icon and expand that so we can see the other parts of the site editor again. From here, we're going to go back to templates. And what we want to do is we want to come back to editing the index template, which, as I mentioned, is the home page for our blog. But before I do that, I wanted to point out that you can see there's a lot of other templates here as well. We have a template for pages. This is very similar to the one that I demonstrated earlier. We also have a few others for archives and for things like 404 pages. Even this one here, which dictates how single posts look. You can also see here that on this one, off camera, I've edited this one, so you can see it's been customized. It has this little blue dot next to it. And if you click on this kebab menu here, you can see that you have the option to clear customizations. So it's good to know that if you're ever customizing a template and you really just want to return to the way it was by default, you can come here into the template view and you can do that. We're going to go ahead and click on the index page and load it in the site editor. Right away you can see that the header changes that we made have been picked up here in the index template. As I mentioned, because we edited the header template part, that has the effect of editing that part for all the templates that use it. Because we used this part on the index page, the edits we made just to that part are picked up here, as well as on other templates that use this part. This header has a nice minimal look that doesn't take up much space, but I'd like for my home page specifically to have a unique header that commands a bit more attention than this. So to do that, I'm going to click on the header template part, and you can see we have this option here in the toolbar to replace it. If I click this, you can see it loads several different header options for us. These are the ones we saw listed before on the template part page. I happen to like this centered header that comes with the theme, so let's pick that. And just like with our other header, we're going to take this one and we're going to make it a rounded logo. I would also like to change the site title. I think it looks better when it's set in an italic font. The same is true of the tagline, so let's change that one as well. We're also going to click on our navigation menu, and we're going to select a menu, again selecting the same primary menu that we brought over from our other theme. Moving on from here, I'm going to expand list view again, and I'm going to click on the query loop block that is setting up the feed of blog posts on this template. What I'd like to do is I'd like to switch to a grid view, which is what my other site had, but you can see here that it's just a little too cramped, so let's change that in the settings on the right. The first thing I want to do is I want to cut down on the number of columns, so let's just display 2 columns. And this is already looking a little bit better, but you can see that the width is still really constrained here quite a bit. The reason for this is that the theme that we started with just had a single column of posts, and so by design the original column was narrow to fit that content. We're going to turn that off by telling that we don't want to inherit this default layout from the theme anymore. And you can see already that this has expanded quite a bit of the view here. In fact, maybe it's made it a little bit too wide, so we're going to constrain the width, but we're just going to set it to 1,000 pixels this time. And I think that looks pretty good. Let's also switch off the defaults for the other settings on this block so we can customize it more freely. The first thing I'd like to do is cut down on the number of posts that are displaying here. This seems like a lot. So let's click in the settings for this block, and let's change the number of items displayed on the page from 10 to 4. That looks pretty good. You can see this change is reflected right away. Another thing I'd like to do here is I'd like to change the titles here and make them just a little bit smaller. They just seem too big for me overall, so let's try a preset. This one seems a bit too small. Let's go ahead and set a custom one instead. Let's try 40 pixels. Still a little bit too large, 35. That seems about right. I like that it's making the titles small enough that for the most part they fit in a single line. While we're here, let's also make a few more changes. There's a read more link here, and I'd like to customize that to say continue reading. And let's also make it bold so that it stands out a little bit. I also want to simplify things a little bit in the post meta, so the first thing I'd like to do is just remove the author line. I'm the only author on this site, so I don't think I really need to show that. Also, we have some post terms here, or tags, and I feel like these clutter it up a bit too, so let's go ahead and delete those as well. Okay, this blog feed is looking good. One more change I'd like to make here is to add a section above this post list so that I can feature my most recent blog post at full width. To do that, I'm going to click on the query loop block in the list view again, and in the floating menu, I'm going to choose the option to insert a new block before this one. On the right, I'm going to click the plus icon, and I'm going to look for another query loop block. When you first add the block, you can see that it fills out with your blog post right away. And also we're presented with the option to try a few different layouts. This one has a nice large image. Let's see if there's others. That seems good, but I really like the large image, so let's go ahead and start with that. Immediately I can see that we're loading more blog posts than I want, so let's go back up to the settings for this block and let's change the number of posts that are shown from 3 to 1. And then when we scroll down, we can see that this section is just sitting above our other feed of blog posts. While I'm here, I'm going to click on the query loop again, and I'm going to constrain the width of this block similar to the one below it, just so that they line up a little bit better. And you can see that they keep that same width all the way through. Another change I want to make here, I'd like to take this post title and I'd like to move it below the image. So to do that, I'm going to click on the controls here and I'm just going to move it down one. And you can see now that it's just below the image instead of above it where it was. Also, I'd like to make this one a little bit bigger. Let's try for a custom size again. I'm going to try 50 pixels. Actually, I think it looks a little better here at 60 pixels. Another change I'm going to make here is I'm going to change the read more link to say continue reading, and I'm also going to bold it to carry the same theme that I'm doing in the posts below. Since this is my most recent post, I don't think I need to show the date for this particular one, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that as well. And you can see this has cleaned up the view quite a bit. One thing I'm noticing is that these sections seem too close together. So I think it would be a good idea to click on the query loop And again, we're going to add another block above it. And this time we're going to add a spacer block. I'm going to go ahead and search for that. And let's make it just a little bit taller to create a bit more separation. I'm going to click out of there so we can see it a little bit better. That looks pretty good. One last thing, I can see that the blog post is repeated twice. We show the first one at the top and then it shows up again in the feed. One nice thing about the query loop is we can prevent this. And to do that, let's click on it in the sidebar. And then here in the settings, you can see we have this option called offset. And I'm going to change this from 0 to 1. And to explain what this does, it basically tells the block, I want you to show a feed of all my blog posts, but before you show that, just skip the first one and show every post after that. And that's exactly what it's done here. You can see that the duplicate post is removed, so it's just shown above now. And when we publish a new blog post, it'll be the one that shows up here at the top, and then it'll kick that one down below to this feed of blog posts we have below it. I'm feeling pretty good about this layout, but before I save my changes, I'm going to preview quickly. And this allows me to see how the design is going to look when it's on a tablet and on a smartphone. And you can see on a smartphone it actually scales really nicely. Everything goes back to a single column view. A two-column view here would just feel too crowded. So let's go ahead and save this template. You can see we've made a few changes here, and that's fine. We're going to confirm those and save. Now let's take a look at our site. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at that site. And one thing that I think was really interesting actually for me just watching this video, I only recorded this about 12 hours ago, by the way, is that that's a 14-minute video. And in that time, we've managed to take the theme and completely customize it so it doesn't really look anything like the demo site. So if we go here to our site, you can see that this is our theme, and this is live on WordPress right now. So you can see that we've got our big header at the top. Everything that follows through here keeps the same width that we had hoped to maintain all the way through. And really, it's done a good job of what my primary goal here was, which was to show my photography a lot larger than it is currently. Another thing that's really interesting is if I click on other pages here, like the About page, for example, you see that those pages, they use our minimized header, our smaller header that we set up originally. And that is true whether you click on any of the pages on the site. When you go back to the home page, though, you have this tall header that we set up, again, showing that if you edit the template part for the header, that's going to make a change that's going to affect a whole bunch of different parts of the site that use that template part. But here on the home page, because we edited the index template directly, we have a custom header just on this page, and that's going to welcome new visitors to our site. And if we compare that with the existing site we started with, you can see that this is really a dramatic change, that the photography here just seems so much smaller and cramped compared to the site that we've just set up. And this really seems like a site that we're going to be able to work with for some years ahead. And even now, this is just getting started. So we could customize it further, which is just something you couldn't do here. You just couldn't do things like remove this sidebar or resize this logo, things that are really just point and click simple right now. I think it's also useful to compare this to our demo site. So if we look at the demo for the theme that we're using, Geologist, you can see that it has this very simple layout with the cream colored background and a single column. And yet, like I was saying, just in the period of time that we've been working here, just 14 minutes, according to the video, we've managed to take that look as our starting point and instead turn it into something that's completely custom. And that's pretty amazing because I did it without any code. I didn't require a designer or any special help at all. Everything just happened here inside of the full site editor. And that's it. That's my presentation. First of all, I know that this was a lot of new info to take in, but I hope that it's inspired you to give full site editing a try. But again, you can see that this is a pretty exciting development and we're just getting started. This is just version 1. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for your attention. I really appreciate it. We have about 500 people in this chat room right now. So it's really great to see you all here. And with that, we've got a little time remaining in the hour. So let's go ahead and get to some of your questions. Okay, now I'm going to go through here and take a look. I flagged a few of these questions ahead of time, and I've also got a few helpers in here that have been answering these by text as well. I know we're not going to be able to get to all of these questions in time. So the first thing I want to point out is that if you have any questions that remain, or if we answered a question for you when we maybe didn't quite get it right, we didn't maybe understand your question fully, you're more than welcome to reach out to happinessengineer@wordpress.com. You can do that at wordpress.com/help. If you have a self-hosted website, we can't help with that directly. We can only help with sites that we host on our network. But if you go to wordpress.com and you start a new site with full site editing, then you would have access to our support at wordpress.com/help. And we're happy to take a look at your site and take a look at what you're doing and get your question answered that way. Okay, so for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip back to my site, and I'm just going to go ahead and pop into the dashboard here for now. And let's go ahead and take a look at a few of the questions here. So Elizabeth asks, will I have full control over background colors and block padding once the new templates are in place? And we did cover that a little bit, so I think you might have asked this before we got the webinar underway, but actually let me go back into Appearance, and load the site editor. And I did want to mention a little thing about padding here. So let's wait for the sidebar to load. Excuse me, the site editor to load. And if we look at our Styles tab here on the right, you can see we talked about our typography and we talked about colors, but there's also some layout options as well. And if you click on that, for this particular theme, there are some padding settings. And what this does is this actually allows you to set the padding site-wide. In our demo, we only changed the width on the index page. And I did that intentionally because I want the other pages of the site to have different widths than the home page. I want that one to be really big. But if you wanted to control your padding for every template on your site, for every page, basically, you could go in here and you could change those. In fact, if you unlock them, you can change them individually. So we could make the padding on the left, padding on the left, padding on the right, sorry, it goes like a clock. So padding on the right, let's make that 300 pixels. And then similarly, let's make the padding on the left 300 pixels as well. And you can see that this has constrained the layout even more. And the thing about this is that if I was to click on other pages like Contact and About, it would adopt this setting as well. So this is, if you ever see a theme where it looks like it kind of has this very central page area and then a background, you could do that using the padding settings in here. And of course it goes, I'm going to go ahead and delete these because I would prefer to sort of, prefer to keep things as they are. Let's close Styles and let's open our sidebar for our blocks. And what I also want to point out is that there's padding options in the blocks themselves. Each block has some sort of settings for padding. This varies a little bit by block, but you can see here that if I click on my site title, for example, and I click on the dimensions option, I have the ability to set margins here as well. And this would just affect the margins for this particular element that's on this template right now. And it would not extend to other parts of the site. It would really just affect things that are happening inside of this query loop right here on our homepage. So there are quite a few options around there. And really, you shouldn't need any code if you're looking to add extra padding to things. But again, if you're having a little trouble, we're more than happy to take a look at wordpress.com/help. Okay, Gus asks, I have a question about editing the size of the text in the header of the website. Well, it looks like we already covered this one again, but I will just underscore, same as I did in the demo, that really everything here in the full site editor is just as simple as clicking on it. And then in the sidebar options, you can see that we have sizes for our fonts. We have things like we can set it to bold or italic or really anything we want. Whoops, sorry, I lost that there. Lost that block for a second. We could also do some interesting things, like we could change it to all caps or no caps if we wanted to. We could come in here and we could change the letter spacing to make them really spaced apart, for example. There's a whole bunch of options here just with each text block. And that's true for the site title here. That's true for headings you have here for your post titles, and even little sections in here like where we're showing our excerpt. So there's definitely a lot of options there for editing the size of text really throughout the whole site. Okay, let me see here. I'm going to expand my view just a little bit more here. There's so many questions here. They're all really quite good. Ruth asks, I'm on a classic theme currently. How can I experiment with what the new theme looks like for a period of time before switching? Well, that's just exactly like I mentioned in our demo video. And I'll show again here by leaving our editor. I'm not going to save any of these changes for now. And Oh, excuse me, I'm looking for this. Here we go. So if you're on WordPress.com, here in the upper left, you'll see this option here to switch your sites. If you only have one site on your account, you won't have this, but you will have this option at the bottom to add a new site. It'll just be sitting out there exposed. Also, if you're on a self-hosted site, like you're using another provider like GoDaddy or Bluehost or similar, then there isn't really an easy way for me to tell you how to set up a new site. That would really vary based on your hosting provider. What I will say is if you're looking for just a really quick way to get started and start experimenting with full site editing, as I've shown in my demo, it's really super simple to just start a new site here on WordPress.com under your account and pick a full site editing, a block theme, which will enable full site editing, and then just export your content and import it into the site, and you're off to the races. Okay. Looking for some good ones here. Okay, how do you know if your theme is a block theme or a classic theme? Well, on WordPress.com, this is a little bit tricky. I'm going to show you here on my site. If I go into Appearance and I click on Themes, you can see here that I'm showing all of the themes that we have here for the site. But these are all by default being shown as block themes. So because I'm using a theme that already has a block theme enabled, I'm shown other block themes as well. But let's go ahead and click on all themes. It looks like we don't have any filtering for it yet. So this hasn't quite launched, but what we would do soon, I'm sure, is add some filtering here so that you'd be able to just click on it and just see a limited view that's only full site editing themes or block themes. And if I go back to my classic site, for example, and I click on themes, I wouldn't actually have the access to the same themes. On WordPress.com, we haven't actually enabled that. There's just basically a switch, and we're still kind of testing things out, of course. But once we give the go-ahead on that, you'd be able to just pick a theme that's a block theme, and we would have a way here for you to select that. And once you activate that theme, then you've basically enabled full site editing on your site. Okay, Dick asks, can the query loop bring back items from the media library, including documents? I'm not sure about media library. I think it sounds like you're hinting at maybe wanting to set up some kind of a portfolio or something like that. And the query loop can't quite do that yet. Let me switch out of my classic site and back into my block theme site, and let's go ahead and launch the editor. And I'll show you just a few of the options that are here in the query loop. Let's let things load for a second. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on the sidebar again. Like I said, the sidebar, I think, really just helps you to sort of navigate through this space and keep things together. And by clicking on the query loop here in the sidebar, I've activated the block that I want to take a look at here. And you'll notice on the right-hand side, underneath the layout options and, well, color options, which are pretty common for all blocks as well, we have another option here called post type. So if I wanted to, I could set up this query loop to show pages and not blog posts. By default, it shows blog posts, and this demo site, of course, was a blog site, so that was the easiest to go with. But you could also just have this thing output pages on your site as well. And you have some other interesting options too, like going from oldest to newest or newest to oldest or sorting alphabetically. I'll tell you, oldest to newest is a really popular question we get. If you happen to publish blog posts as chapters, or you maybe you're writing a book and putting it online, for example, or maybe you're just telling a story with your blog post and you'd really like for that to be in story order, you can just click on this option and it'll immediately flip the block. And you'll see it here, actually. It loads my oldest post, which is from summer. I miss summer. I don't know about you guys, but this is a lovely view. So again, there's an awful lot of flexibility here. There's also the option to include sticky posts. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that format, but a sticky post is just basically a way to designate in WordPress that I want this blog post to stay at the top of the feed. No matter how old it is, I don't want it to get pushed down by newer stuff. I want it to stay up there. And so you have the option to include or exclude that. Not everyone wants to show those in the blog feed itself. And you even have some filtering available too. So for this particular feed, I'm just showing all of my blog posts, but if I wanted to, I could limit this just to, let's see here, let's do photo walks. Oops, having some trouble typing, something about having 500 people watching me. Here we go. So I can limit the output of this just to photo walks. And you can see that as I've done that, it's really just instantly cropped the feed. So instead of showing every single blog post I have on my site, I'm just showing the ones that I've added the category of photo walk to. This brings up some really awesome possibilities because you could set up pages on your site for the different categories you have. So let's imagine I have a travel category and a photo category, and I'd like to show those as separate pages. You can create a page for that. You can make the page as custom as you want with any blocks you want, and then put in your query loop block and set the feed to only show blog posts from that category. And you've created yourself a custom category page. That same filtering is available here as well for tags. If you have a multi-author blog and you want to just show posts from a single author, you have the option to do that here as well. It even has the ability to search for keywords. And I'll be honest and say that I haven't tried this yet. Full site editing is so new that even I haven't had a chance to try out all the options. So I'm learning right along with you guys. But you can see that the query loop block has an awful lot of power. And this is just on version 1. Now, I don't have any insight into where exactly this is going to go in the near future, but my expectation would be that this block is going to continue to get built out and continue to have more options. And this is true of full site editing in general. This is just version 1. It's a little rough around the edges here and there, but you can see that even with that, it's really powerful. And we expect that to evolve and improve and get smoother and even better over time. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Let's go ahead and grab another question here. Let's see here. Okay. Oops, cancel. Judy is asking, I'm using an organic freebie theme. Will that be compatible? And the answer is that it's not. And I'll probably qualify that a little bit and say it's not an option right now. Because block themes are so new, there's really just a limited set of them that you can choose from. And it's not the case that you can just tack on full site editing onto a classic theme, because the code, what goes into making the theme is just so drastically different. Now, for the future, it might be the case that that ability will be added. I could see the possibility of someone creating a plugin that adds some full site editing features to classic themes. It's definitely a possibility. Also, I've seen kind of an interesting trend that's starting to happen where folks who've created custom themes, maybe like the one that you're using on your site now, are going back and they're redesigning that theme as a block theme so that it can use full site editing. So it looks and feels very much like the same theme you're using now, but it is a different theme and it has different code. And that's something that you could use on your site to use full site editing. But to answer your original question, for now anyway, that's not possible. You would need to use a block theme that works with full site editing. Okay, let's see. Judy asks, what happened to the sidebars? Also, hello from Victoria. I'm so close to you here in Tacoma, so howdy. Hope you're enjoying the sun today. I'm enjoying it as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about this. Now, if we go back to my original, let's actually load that up. If we go back to my original theme, you can see that it had a sidebar in it from go. This was here the day that I activated this theme on my site, and it's always been there. And in my case, I didn't actually want it there, so I decided to remove it. And that was really easy to do in this case because the theme that I started from, it actually didn't have a sidebar to begin with at all. So that's really where it went. I just switched to a theme that didn't have a sidebar, and the sidebar was gone. But what I will say is that full site editing, and I think I mentioned this also in the presentation, full site editing would allow you to add a sidebar to a page template. I can't really walk you through that here in the space of our webinar, but basically what you would do is you'd add something called a columns block to the template. And you can set that columns block so that it's like, wide on one side and narrow on the other side. And then from there, you can add your content into the main section, and you can put it's a template part called the sidebar, and you can pop it in there, and it basically creates a sidebar for that page. Possibly a topic for a future webinar. I know that there's so many things we could do with full site editing that I could literally just hit record and keep going here. But yes, you could have a sidebar if you wanted. It's not shown in this particular webinar, but it's definitely an option with full site editing. Okay, let's see. Erica asks, is it possible to limit full site editing to admins only? I'm going to admit that I'm really not sure about that. What I suspect, and I haven't had a chance to verify this myself, so I don't want to give bad information, but generally speaking, customizing your site is something that only admins can do currently anyway. So if you're an editor or you're an author or even just a contributor, if you have a lower level role on the site, you typically don't have permissions to do much of anything other than, you know, your own pages, your own blog posts. If you're an editor, you can edit other people's pages and blog posts, but even an editor doesn't have access to the customization tools. So I suspect that this is the case as well with full site editing. I'd like to follow up on that and see if that's the case, but that's my understanding right now. Okay, let's find another good one here. Alfonso asks, will I be able to use custom meta fields to add special content to our page templates? For example, insert a podcast player with the template fields by adding the embed code in the meta field. I would say that, so first of all, this is for anyone who's new to WordPress and hasn't really experienced a lot of WordPress, custom meta fields is a little bit more advanced. It's something you see a lot. You see a lot more with self-hosted sites like on Bluehost and GoDaddy and other providers. And it's basically a way to edit the template so that you can add new sections to it. And honestly, that's not even necessary anymore, because with full site editing, you just add your new section. You don't need to add a custom meta field. And to explain what that is for people who haven't experienced it, when you're in the dashboard of your site, you might have a little box here in your sidebar where you can type in some text, and then your theme knows to take that and put it somewhere in the layout. But you don't actually see it in front of you. It isn't at all like what we have here when we're inside of the editor, where I can see the entire site live before me and I can make changes there. So in a way, it's actually really nice because it removes that layer of abstraction. You're no longer typing information into a field that you know is going to show up somewhere, or even you don't have to remember where it is, because here we are working right on the site itself. And so we don't even have to think about that sort of thing. That was a really interesting question, Alfonso. Thank you very much for that one. Let's see. When creating, Amanda asks, when creating a new site and importing content, what is the theme we need to choose again? And the theme that you need to choose for WordPress.com when you enter the new site creation flow is any of the themes that you see in front of you. And that was true in the demo video that I shot as well, that as you're going through the process of creating your site and naming it and all of those other things, you're shown a bunch of themes that you can choose from. And every single theme you see in that view is a block theme. So it's hard to go wrong. You can just pick whichever one you like that you think kind of gets you closest to the starting point you want. Generally speaking, I recommend, if you're new to full site editing, it's a good idea to pick a theme that gets you really close, so you don't have to make a whole lot of changes, and then you can just make selective changes as you go. Also, if you are, and I don't really have a good way to show this. Let me see if I can find a way to do this here. On WordPress.org. On WordPress.org, there are themes. There is a theme directory, and it actually has a really easy way for you to pick those themes. So let me see. I'm actually off screen here. I'm trying to find where the themes are, because if I remember correctly, this was really easy to find. Let's see here. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So let me drop this here into a new tab, just so you can see what I'm talking about. So if you're using a self-hosted site with another provider like Bluehost or HostGator or something like that, and also if you have a business site or an e-commerce site on our business plan or on our WordPress.com hosting, which as I mentioned, basically has all the same features and functionality as a self-hosted.org type site, but it's on our managed hosting where we take care of the backups and security and all the things that everyone enjoys with WordPress.com sites. But if you look here on WordPress.org/themes, and then you click on the feature filter, you can scroll down here, and one of the features that's available is called full site editing. So if I click on that filter and then apply it, immediately I'm shown just just block themes, no themes other than themes that work with full site editing. So this is a really great way, if you have the option to upload a theme on your site, to find themes like this. And also you should see these same filtering options if you go into your dashboard of your site and click under appearance and click on themes, and then search for a theme in the theme directory there. That's true if you're using self-hosted WordPress and if you're on our business and e-commerce plan. As I mentioned, and I'll just say it again, if you're on WordPress.com and you're not upgraded to one of those two plans, then you can't switch an existing site quite yet. It'll definitely happen. We're not quite sure exactly when, but we'll announce it when it does. But you'll definitely be able to do that at some point down the road. And again, for now, I really think that it's best, especially when you're starting out, to just export your content like I showed you and then import it into a new site. And that way you can play to your heart's content and you can do anything to explore FSE, full site editing. We call it FSE sometimes, a shorthand, but it allows you to explore and kind of try out the new features. And I don't know about you, but sometimes one of the best ways that I can learn how to use a tool is just to try my best to break it and just try to just throw a bunch of stuff at it and see what happens. So if that's how you like to roll, it's definitely how I like to do it. Then starting a second site really is just about the best way to go. Let's see here. We have, oh, this is a really interesting question. Jenna asks, oops, sorry, grabbed the wrong one here. Jenna asks, can you please explain the exact differences between a reusable block and a template part, or are these one and the same? They're very similar. I think this is a little bit conceptual, so I think it'll be hard to explain. I would say that it's probably the case you could use both. They're more alike than different. So here in our site editor, we have template parts, and the reason we call them template parts is because they show up here in our interface. So they show up in the template part section of the full site editor, and they're listed here. We don't show reusable blocks in this space, and reusable blocks came about before we had full site editing and we had just the WordPress block editor, which allowed you to use blocks to create layout within a page, but didn't allow you to really customize anything outside of that. And so reusable blocks were a really great way to get you to, say, for example, you wanted to have an announcement that you wanted to add on several pages on your site. You'd create a collection of blocks in your editor, and you'd save that as a reusable block. And then you'd be able to call upon that block anytime you're creating a new page on your site. This is a little different, though, in that it's actually being fed into the templates directly, but still very similar. I think that I would describe it as reusable blocks was sort of the thing that we came up with to allow you to reuse blocks more readily. And it's one of the stepping stones on the path to full site editing. Now, I think that this is probably a really great one where you might want to reach out to a happiness engineer at wordpress.com/help. And we can dig in even a little bit further with that and maybe try and understand why you're asking that question and see if you're having a little trouble with making the jump from using reusable blocks to using template parts inside of the full site editor. Okay, and then we have Bujima asks, how do you create a menu? And I'll be honest with you and say that I actually haven't done this yet. As I've experimented with full site editing, I've tended to just set up my own menus and not set up one by default. So let's go ahead and just change this one we have right now, and let's just create a new menu. So we're going to start from an empty menu, and I'm going to click on the plus sign. And you can see we're actually shown a little list of some of the pages that we have on our site currently. And in this case, I just like to add, I'm going to do basically the same menu again that I have. I'd like to add a home link. And to do that, I can just click on this option that comes up. And this adds home, and it's just a link in my menu. But if I click back into the navigation bar again, I can add a new link. So I can add one to my blog, or I can add one to my about page. Generally speaking, creating the menu is just as easy here in full site editing as it is in our classic customizer view. The thing that I think trips a lot of people up, for example, is let's say I want to have a new page on here called portfolio, but I haven't actually created the page yet. So it's not showing up on my site. And that would make it really difficult to add it to the menu, because if it was something I'd created and already published, it would be showing up here. So this is a little bit of a chicken versus an egg kind of problem. It's hard to tell, should I create the menu first and then the pages, or vice versa? It's definitely vice versa. You definitely want to create your pages first, and then you would come here and edit the menu and add those pages into the menu. So I hope that answers your question. I know it's just a little bit on the fly, but again, if I didn't quite capture that, feel free to reach out at wordpress.com/help, and we'll take a look at your site. Okay, it looks like we are at the top of the hour. Again, I want to thank you all very much for your time and attention today. I don't think there's any way that we could possibly get through all these questions, but I'm truly humbled by the amount of interest that we've had today. And we'll be doing more webinars like this. We have another full site editing webinar coming up in 2 weeks. And we'll be looking, of course, at expanded topics. And as full site editing grows and features, we expect that we'll also be showing more content, showing you how to use these new tools. So that's all for me. I want to thank you all again, and I hope to see you soon. I'm a happiness engineer, so if you're calling asking for help with your site, there's an equal chance that you might get me, and I'd really love to see what you've done with full site editing. So until then, thank you again. Take care, everyone.